You know, people often ask me how I remember so much. They think there's some trick, some system I use to store all these equations and principles and ideas in my head. And the truth is, I don't remember most of it, not in the way they think. When I was a young man at MIT, I watched my fellow students stay up all night before exams, cramming formulas into their heads. They'd write them on their hands, repeat them over and over, test each other in the hallways. And the next morning, they'd march into that exam room like soldiers going to battle, hoping desperately that nothing would fall out of their heads before they could write it down on paper. A week later, if you asked them the same question, they'd look at you with blank faces. The information was gone, evaporated, as if they'd never learned it at all. I remember one particular exam in my junior year, advanced calculus. The fellow sitting next to me, brilliant guy, worked harder than anyone I knew, had spent 2 weeks memorizing theorems and proofs. He had flashcards, study groups, the whole works. I'd see him in the library at midnight, muttering formulas to himself. The day of the exam, he froze. He could remember the first line of a proof, but not where it went. He knew there was a theorem that applied, but couldn't quite recall its exact statement. He'd built a house of cards, and when one card slipped, the whole thing came down. 6 months later, I asked him about one of those theorems, just out of curiosity, wondering how he'd approach a problem I was working on, and he looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. It was all gone. I did something different, though I didn't realize it was different at the time. I just couldn't help myself. You see, I had this problem. I needed to understand where things came from. Not just what they were, but why they were. And that changed everything. Let me tell you what I mean. In my sophomore year, we were learning Maxwell's equations. Beautiful things. Really, 4 equations that describe all of electricity and magnetism. My classmates would write them down, stare at them, try to burn them into their memory. But I couldn't do that. I'd look at one of those equations and I'd think, why does it look like that? Where did Maxwell get this from? And I'd have to work backward, tracing the reasoning, until I could see the whole path from the simple experiments with magnets and wires all the way up to this elegant mathematical statement. It took longer, much longer. Sometimes I'd spend an entire evening just understanding one equation while my roommate memorized all 4 and went to bed. He'd shake his head at me, tell me I was wasting time, that we had an exam in 3 days and I was still fiddling around with the basics. But here's the thing, I never forgot those equations. Not because I have a good memory, but because I didn't memorize them at all. I understood them. There's a world of difference between those two things. You see, memory is a funny thing. We think of it like a filing cabinet, where you put information in and hope you can find it again when you need it. But that's not how it really works. Real memory, the kind that lasts, the kind that's useful, isn't storage at all. It's reconstruction. You're not pulling out a file. You're rebuilding the idea from pieces you understand. Think about your own life for a moment. You remember how to get to your friend's house, don't you? But you're not remembering a list of instructions like, turn left at the 3rd Street, go 0.4 miles, turn right. No, you remember landmarks, feelings, the logic of the route. You remember that big oak tree, the yellow house on the corner, the fact that you're heading toward the river. And from those pieces, you reconstruct the path every time. You couldn't forget it if you tried, because you're not storing it, you're understanding it. Or think about something simpler. You know how to make a cup of coffee, right? But you've never memorized the steps. You don't recite to yourself, first fill the kettle, second boil the water, third put coffee in the cup. You just understand the logic of it. Hot water, coffee, mix them together. The exact sequence emerges from understanding what you're trying to do. And because you understand the purpose, extracting flavor from coffee grounds with hot water, you can adapt. If you don't have a kettle, you can use a pot. If you don't have a cup, you can use a mug. Understanding is flexible. Memorization is rigid. That's what I learned to do with physics, and later with everything else I wanted to truly know. I didn't try to remember. I tried to understand so deeply that forgetting became impossible. Let me give you a real example from my work. When I was at Los Alamos during the war, we were working on some very complex calculations for the atomic bomb project. Horrifying thing, really, but that's another story. The point is, we had these incredibly complicated integrals to solve nasty things that would take pages and pages of algebra to work through. My colleagues would solve them once, carefully write down every step in their notebooks, and then refer back to those notebooks whenever they needed the result. I did it differently. Every single time I needed one of those integrals, I would solve it again from scratch. People thought I was insane. You already did this last week, they'd say. Just look at your notes, but I wouldn't. I'd work through it again, and often I'd find a different path, a cleaner way to reach the answer. And something strange happened after a while. These solutions that took me an hour the first time would take me 20 minutes, then 10, then 5. Not because I was remembering the steps, but because I was understanding the structure. I was seeing the pattern underneath. I started to recognize when a certain substitution would work, Not because I'd memorized, use this substitution for this type of problem, but because I could feel how the equations wanted to move. It's hard to explain, but it's like knowing how to dance. You don't remember the steps. You feel the music and your body knows what to do. There was one integral in particular, a really nasty one involving exponentials and oscillating functions that kept coming up in different contexts. The first time I solved it, it took me most of an afternoon. Lots of false starts, integration by parts, clever tricks. The second time it appeared, I started fresh again. This time I found a slightly different approach, and it only took an hour. The third time, I suddenly saw a symmetry I'd missed before, and the whole thing collapsed into something much simpler. By the 10th time, I could practically write down the answer, but not because I'd memorized it. I'd internalized the structure so deeply that solving it felt like answering, what's 2 plus 2? The human brain is remarkable at pattern recognition. We're built for it. We see faces in clouds, hear words in random noise, find meaning in chaos. That's our gift, but we waste it when we try to use our brains like computers, storing raw data. Computers are wonderful at that, we're not. What we're wonderful at is finding connections, seeing relationships, building webs of meaning. So here's what I discovered. If you want to remember something forever, don't try to remember it. Instead, connect it to things you already understand. Build it into your web of knowledge so thoroughly that it becomes part of how you think. When I learned quantum mechanics, truly learned it, not just memorized it. I spent months playing with toy problems. Simple systems, simpler than anything you'd see in a real exam. A particle in a box, a harmonic oscillator. I'd solve them in every way I could think of. I'd draw pictures, make analogies, try to explain them to myself in plain English. And slowly, the principles became part of me. They weren't facts I remembered. They were ways of thinking I had absorbed. I remember one night, lying in bed, unable to sleep because I was thinking about the uncertainty principle. Not the formula, anyone can memorize that, but what it really means. I thought about trying to measure where an electron is. To see it, you need light. But light has momentum, and when it hits the electron, it gives it a kick. The harder you try to pin down the position, the bigger the kick, the more uncertain the momentum becomes. It's not a limitation of our instruments. It's built into the fabric of reality. Position and momentum are complementary ways of describing the same thing, and you can't have both perfectly at once. When I finally felt that, not just knew it, but felt it, I could never forget it. It became part of how I see the world. There's a test I've always used, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to really know something. I call it the Explain It Simply test. Here's how it works. After you think you've learned something, try to explain it to someone who doesn't know it, not using the technical words you just learned. Not by repeating what your teacher said, but in your own words, using everyday analogies and simple language. If you can't do this, you don't understand it. Not really. You've only memorized a sophisticated way of talking about it. And that's the trap that catches so many bright people. They learn the language of a subject, they learn to use the right words in the right order, and they mistake that fluency for understanding. But it's not the same thing at all. I remember when I was learning about entropy and thermodynamics. I could recite the definition. Entropy is a measure of disorder in a system. I could write down the equations, manipulate them, solve problems. But one day, someone asked me to explain it without using any technical terms, and I couldn't. I tried, and it all came out as gibberish. That's when I knew I didn't really understand it. So I went back and thought about it differently. I thought about a drop of ink in water, spreading out. I thought about a messy desk and the natural tendency of things to spread out and mix up. I thought about ice melting in a glass of water. Why does it always go that direction? Why doesn't the water freeze and the ice cube get hotter? I thought about information and certainty. What does it mean for something to be ordered? If I have all the molecules of a gas in one corner of a room, I know where they are. That's information. When they spread out, I've lost that information. The entropy increased. And gradually, I built up a real understanding that didn't depend on the formula. After that, I never had to remember what entropy meant. I knew it. More than that, I could feel it. I could look at any system and have an intuition about what would happen to its entropy. Not because I'd memorized rules, but because I understood the principle. This is why teaching is such a powerful tool for learning. When you try to teach something, you're forced to confront the gaps in your understanding. The questions people ask, often simple questions, reveal where you're relying on memorization instead of understanding. I learned more physics from teaching it than I ever learned from studying it. Every time a student asked me why instead of what, I had to either know the answer or admit I didn't. And admitting I didn't know was often the beginning of really learning. I taught introductory physics for years, and every single semester, some student would ask a question that stopped me in my tracks. Simple questions, usually. Why does a heavier object not fall faster? Why is the sky blue? What actually is energy? And I'd realized that I'd been using these words, manipulating these concepts. But I'd never really thought deeply about the fundamental question they were asking. Those moments were gifts. They forced me to go back and think more carefully, to build a better understanding. There was one student quiet girl, sat in the back, who asked me why we use different formulas for momentum in relativity versus classical mechanics. I started to give her the standard explanation about how the equations change at high speeds, but she interrupted me. "No," she said. "I mean, why? What's really different?" And I realized I'd been teaching the formulas without teaching the insight, so I started over. I talked about how our everyday intuition about adding velocities breaks down. I talked about what it means for the speed of light to be constant for all observers. I talked about how momentum has to be redefined to maintain conservation laws when these weird things start happening. By the end, I'd understood relativity better than I had before she asked the question. There's something else I discovered, though it took me years to articulate it. Understanding isn't a destination, it's a process. You don't learn something once and then you're done. You come back to it again and again, each time from a different angle, and each time you understand it a little more deeply. I must have learned classical mechanics, Newton's laws, and all that at least a dozen times in my life. Once in high school, again in college, again in graduate school, then again when I taught it, and then again when I had to explain it for lectures or write about it. And every single time, I learned something new. Not new facts, the laws of motion haven't changed, but new understanding, new connections, new ways of seeing why things had to be that way. The first time I learned Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration, I just memorized it. It was a formula you used to solve problems. The second time, I understood it as a definition of force. The third time, I saw how it connected to conservation of momentum. The fourth time, I realized it was really a statement about how systems respond to constraints. Each layer of understanding made the previous layers richer, and none of it required memorization because each new insight was built on genuine comprehension of what came before. This is perhaps the most important thing I can tell you about remembering. The act of forgetting and relearning is not a failure, it's the method. Every time you reconstruct an idea from pieces you understand, you strengthen those connections. You make the pattern more clear. You see more of the structure. I used to work problems over and over, not because I didn't know how to solve them, but because each time through, I'd see something I'd missed before. Maybe I'd noticed that this equation has the same form as one from a different area of physics. Maybe I'd realize that the reason this step works is connected to some deeper principle. These insights don't come from memorizing. They come from doing, from playing, from thinking. There was a whole summer when I just played with special relativity problems. I'd make up scenarios, a train moving past a station, light bouncing between mirrors, twins going on journeys, and I'd work out what different observers would see. Not for any exam, not for any practical purpose, just because I wanted to feel how relativity worked. And after that summer, relativity wasn't something I'd learned. It was something I lived in. I could close my eyes and visualize events in space-time, see how different observers slice up that space-time into their own notions of space and time. You can't memorize that kind of intuition. You can only build it. You know, there's a joy in this approach that I think we often lose in our obsession with efficiency. We want to learn something once and be done with it. Check the box, move on to the next thing. But real understanding is playful. It's curious. It's willing to spend an afternoon just thinking about why things work the way they do. Not because you'll be tested on it, but because it's interesting. I remember sitting in my backyard one summer, watching water spiral down a drain, and spending an hour just thinking about why it spirals. I already knew the answer, angular momentum, Coriolis effect, all that. But I wanted to really feel it, to see it in my mind, to understand it from the water's point of view. Was that a waste of time? In terms of productivity, maybe. But that hour of thinking probably did more for my understanding of fluid dynamics than a week of reading textbooks would have done. Or I'd watch my kids play on a swing set and think about pendulums. Not the equations, I knew those, but the physical intuition. Why does pushing at just the right moment make them go higher? What's really happening with energy transfer? How does the system know what its natural frequency is? I'd push them and feel the rhythm and think about resonance, and suddenly I'd understand something about oscillating systems that I'd never gotten from textbooks. This is what I mean when I say I don't remember things. I don't have them stored away in some mental filing cabinet. Instead, I have this landscape of understanding in my mind. And when I need something, I navigate through that landscape. I reconstruct the idea from principles I know, from patterns I've seen before, from connections that make sense to me. And here's the beautiful part. Once you build this kind of understanding, it becomes almost impossible to forget. Not because you're trying to hold on to it, but because it's woven into the fabric of how you think. You'd have to unlearn how to see patterns, how to make connections, how to think, and that's not something you can forget. I suppose what I'm really describing is the difference between knowledge and wisdom, though those are awfully grand words. Knowledge is having the right answer stored somewhere. Wisdom is being able to figure out the right answer when you need it. Knowledge is remembering that force equals mass times acceleration. Wisdom is looking at a child on a swing and understanding, really understanding, why pushing at the right moment makes them go higher. And the path to this kind of wisdom isn't fast. It isn't efficient. It doesn't fit well on a syllabus or a study plan. It's messy and personal and sometimes frustrating. But it's also permanent. It's yours in a way that memorized facts never are. I think about the difference between learning a piece of music and memorizing it. You can memorize the notes, this finger here, that finger there, this rhythm, that dynamic. But if you lose your place, you're lost. You have to start over from the beginning or from some other anchor point you've memorized. But if you understand the music, the harmony, the melody, the structure, the emotional arc, you can never really be lost. You know where you are because you feel where you are. And if you make a mistake, you can improvise, adapt, find your way back. You're not executing a memorized sequence. You're creating something you understand. That's how I want to know things. Not as a sequence of steps to execute, but as a structure I understand well enough to improvise within, to adapt, to see from different angles. So if you're trying to learn something, really learn it, not just pass a test on it. Here's my advice. Slow down. Don't rush to memorize. Instead, ask why. Ask where it comes from. Try to explain it to yourself in the simplest possible terms. Play with it. Turn it around in your mind. Connect it to things you already know. And when you forget it, because you will forget it, don't panic. Go back and rebuild it. Each time you do, you're not just remembering. You're deepening your understanding. Make up your own examples. Don't just work the problems in the book. Create problems for yourself. Ask what-if questions. What if this parameter was bigger? What if that force was reversed? What if I changed this assumption? Each question leads you deeper into the structure of what you're learning. And be patient with yourself. Understanding takes time. It's not linear. Some days you'll feel like you're getting nowhere. Then suddenly, maybe in the shower or on a walk, something will click and you'll see it all differently. That's not a magic moment of inspiration. It's your brain working in the background, making connections, finding patterns. Trust that process. There's a humility in this approach, I think. It means admitting that you don't really know something just because you can recite it. It means being willing to say, I don't understand this yet, instead of pretending you do. But it also means trusting that if you put in the effort to truly understand, the remembering will take care of itself. I've spent my whole life learning things, and the older I get, the more I realize how little I actually know. But what I do know, I really know. Not because I have a great memory, but because I built each piece of understanding carefully, connecting it to everything else I know, until it became part of how I see the world. And that's what makes it worth it in the end. Not the facts you can recite, but the way understanding changes how you see things. When you really understand something, the world becomes richer. You see patterns you missed before. You make connections you couldn't see. Everything becomes more interesting because you have more ways of thinking about it. That's the hidden formula, if there is one. Don't try to remember. Try to understand. The rest follows naturally, like water running downhill. And that's not a trick or a hack. It's just how the mind works when you let it do what it does best. Find meaning, make connections, and see patterns in the beautiful complexity of things. So the next time you're trying to learn something and you feel the urge to memorize, to drill it into your head through repetition, stop, take a breath. Ask yourself, do I understand where this comes from? Can I explain it simply? Does it connect to anything else I know? Give yourself permission to be slow, to be thorough, to really think. Your future self, the one who still understands this years from now, will thank you.
Your mind was not designed for success. Evolution didn't shape the human brain to achieve genius, and certainly not financial freedom. The brain was built for one thing only: survival. It carries millions of years of biological programming, and that programming prioritizes fear, laziness, and the search for the easiest path. That's why so many men and women remain stuck in cycles of mediocrity. They're trying to run an extraordinary life on outdated software. But pay very close attention to me right now. There's a secret, almost forbidden, that can completely transform your life. The mental hack to unlock success 100 times faster. Think about a computer. It can be hacked, it can be optimized, and it can become something far more powerful than it was at the beginning. Now imagine your mind the same way. It's also like a computer, but infinitely more complex. If someone can unlock hidden functions in an ordinary machine, just imagine what happens when you learn to hack your own brain. You unlock resources that were always there but never used. You accelerate processes, create new pathways, open possibilities that once seemed unreachable. The difference is that, when it comes to the mind, this hack doesn't just boost performance, it redefines who you are and what you can achieve. That's why you must hack your mind. You can't expect it to naturally move toward discipline, focus, and success. You need to break that primitive pattern and install new instructions that will stimulate and train your brain until it becomes a machine of achievement. What you need to do with your mind is recreate it, to build a new system inside it. And now I ask you, are you ready to reprogram your brain and open the door to a whole new level of life? Because starting right now, I'm going to show you how to turn this theory into practice. So pay close attention. True understanding only happens when we can explain something in a simple way. Let me explain it to you more clearly. The mind is biological hardware with software installed by genetics, by society, and by your personal history. These programs define what you believe to be possible, but you don't have to accept that code as final. You can question it, rewrite it, install new lines of command. When you decide to read every day, when you force yourself to study what others avoid, when you choose to face emotions instead of running from them, you're literally writing new code inside your brain. But listen carefully. You can't hack something without inserting an intruder. In machines, that intruder might be a script, a patch that forces the system to work differently. But in your mind, the intruder is pain, the discomfort of acting against your natural impulse, the effort of doing something your body and your habits reject. It's waking up early when your body wants to sleep. It's pushing yourself to study when your brain craves distraction. That intruder, the pain of unnatural effort, is the first step to rewriting your mental code. Inside this method, the first thing to understand is that nothing unnatural for your mind will ever exist without pain. If you want to take your mind towards success, you must accept pain as part of the process, not as a sign of failure. Accepting doesn't mean liking it. It means recognizing that discomfort is the fuel of transformation. So first, give pain a name. Don't run from it. Identify it. Is it fatigue? Is it fear? Is it boredom? When you name the enemy, it loses part of its power over you. Then, reduce the barrier. Instead of waiting to have the energy to read an entire book, start with 5 minutes. Instead of promising to change your whole life at once, take one small but firm step. The brain learns in small doses. And realize this, your mind also has an antivirus constantly running, trying to protect you. These are the beliefs you've collected, the patterns you've learned since childhood, the habits that became automatic. That antivirus acts to block any change because it was designed to keep you in the same place. It doesn't understand that you want to prosper. It only understands that change means risk. That's why when you try to install a new mental program, the inner antivirus starts screaming, "This isn't you. This won't work. Why even try?" But this is exactly where the hack comes in. Every time you face that block, every time you push through, you're showing the system that the new code is valid. And the more you reinforce it, the weaker the antivirus becomes. And here's the most powerful part. You can reprogram the antivirus itself. When you begin to associate pain with the old pattern and pleasure with the new, the system itself starts protecting the path it once rejected. That's how you transform limiting beliefs into liberating ones. That's how your mind stops being a prison and becomes your ally. But guess what? This process requires pain. And if there's pain, that's a good sign. It means the hack is working. And this is the line that separates those who win from those who quit. The weak interpret pain as proof that they weren't born for this. The strong understand pain as the entry ticket to a new level of life. They know that every difficult emotion is just a code waiting to be rewritten. Imagine this. You feel fear. But what is fear if not primitive programming to protect you from danger? When you confront that fear, you show your system it doesn't need to react with panic, but with focus. You teach it. Every emotion the world labels as bad carries a hidden benefit if you know how to use it the right way. There's no such thing as a useless emotion. What exists is energy that hasn't been directed properly. And here's the secret. The anxiety that once paralyzed you can turn into adrenaline to make you act faster. It prepares you for the future. Have you noticed that when you're stressed, you become more focused? Stress sharpens attention and priorities. It sharpens your focus. In small doses, it forces you to cut the noise, see what truly matters, and act. Use this. When you feel pressure, make a strict list of 3 things that generate immediate results. Stress will push you toward those tasks. You just need to direct it. Anger is raw power. It gives you strength and courage to break through barriers. Channel anger into disciplined work. Short sets of heavy tasks, 25-minute sprints, physical training. Well-directed anger becomes focus and productivity. Fear, so often condemned, is actually a powerful radar. It shows you where the risks are, and if you face it with courage, fear becomes a guide. It doesn't have to freeze you. It can teach you to prepare, to sharpen your skills, and to step onto the field more competent. Even sadness has a role. It slows you down, pushes you to reflect, forces you to look within. That painful dive can produce clarity, learning, maturity. Sadness can be a turning point if you turn it into a lesson. That's the real hack, realizing that nothing in you is wasted. Every emotion, used the right way, is a piece of code ready to be executed in favor of your success. So here's a practical guide to start hacking your mind. When you feel stress, don't fight it. Stop, take 3 deep breaths, and ask, what needs my attention right now? Use stress as a filter. Choose 1 or 2 key tasks and attack them with intensity. Stress will turn into focus. When anxiety shows up, don't let it swallow you. Turn anxiety into movement. Take that electric energy in your body and convert it into immediate action. Rehearse out loud. Organize your desk. Draft a quick outline. You'll feel the relief of action and realize anxiety was just fuel. If fear comes, look it in the eye. Ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario and how can I prepare? Once you prepare, fear shrinks because now there's a plan, a strategy. What felt paralyzing becomes guidance. With anger, don't explode. Channel it. Use it to work harder, train stronger, create with sharper focus. Think, every drop of anger can be converted into creative power if you choose the right target. In sadness, instead of drowning, treat it as an invitation to reflect. Write, question yourself, pull clarity out of pain. Many of the greatest works and ideas were born in moments of sadness because that's when the mind turns inward and finds meaning. When guilt or shame hit, don't run. Own it. Learn. Correct. Use them as a compass to realign your behavior and build a more integral, respected version of yourself. The secret is simple. Name the emotion, accept the pain, convert it into action. That's how you hack the brain. That's how you turn what looked like weakness into strength. Do you see the power in this? Once you understand that every so-called negative emotion can become a tool, you'll never again look inside yourself as an enemy. You'll see an arsenal ready to be used in your climb towards success. But now pay very close attention. The true mental hack isn't just turning pain into strength, it's also breaking addictions and reprogramming routines. Think about it. Every bad habit you have, procrastinating, infinite scrolling, eating what harms your body, postponing what must be done, is like a virus installed in your system. It runs automatically without you noticing, sabotaging your performance. And here's the hard truth. You never actually lose a habit. You only replace it. If you don't install a new program, the old one keeps running. So how do you do this? Pay attention. Step 1. Identify the trigger. Every addiction has a starting point. It might be boredom, it might be stress, it might simply be the sight of your phone in front of you. Name that trigger. Once you see the starting point, you've already begun to defuse the bomb. Step 2. Flip the routine. When you feel the urge to procrastinate, don't fight the emptiness. Fill it with a minimum action. If you were about to scroll endlessly, open a book for 5 minutes instead. This substitute habit is the hack that tricks the system, turning sabotage into progress. Step 3. Install the right rewards. Your brain loves dopamine, and that's why addiction sticks so hard. So create pleasure in the new habit. Celebrate waking up early with an energizing cold shower. Pair reading with a special cup of coffee. Give yourself small rewards when you hit a goal. You're training the system to love what it once rejected. And here's the final key: consistency. Nobody becomes a genius overnight. But when you repeat for 30, 60, 90 days, what once felt like effort becomes automatic. The habit of procrastination gives way to the habit of action. The habit of waking up late gives way to the habit of rising with purpose. The habit of consuming empty things is replaced by the habit of feeding your mind with powerful knowledge. To truly understand something is to be able to play with it. So play with your habits. Experiment with change. Test rewards. Adjust triggers. That's how you hack the system. Now I ask you, are you ready to break into the programming that's been holding you back and install the most powerful version of yourself? So now I want you to do something. Write in the comments which habit you're going to hack first. It might be waking up early, stopping procrastination, reading every day, or mastering your emotions. Declare it publicly, because when you write it down, you're programming your brain to act. And if this video opened your eyes, if it made you think in a different way, hit the like button right now. That's the signal you send to the algorithm and to yourself that you're committed to growth. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications if you want to keep receiving secrets, techniques, and powerful hacks to transform your mind and your life. Because I promise you, this is just the beginning of a journey that can completely reprogram your destiny. Hack your mind, rewrite your story, and claim everything you deserve. When someone says they need to be more productive, what they usually mean is that they've lost control of their own attention. The real problem is never productivity. The real problem is cognitive indiscipline, the inability to decide what truly deserves mental energy. An undisciplined mind confuses movement with progress. It acts before understanding, collects endless tasks, reacts to every stimulus, and calls that work. But work without direction isn't productivity, it's noise. And the more noise there is, the less clarity you have. In neuroscience, this is known as cognitive hyperactivity, a brain processing more information than it can organize. The result is exhaustion, and ironically, a deep sense of unproductivity. Discipline, in contrast, is a form of mental engineering. It's the deliberate act of limiting what enters your mind so you can preserve your ability to think. To be disciplined is to choose focus before action, and every choice is also an exclusion. Saying yes to one thing means saying no to everything else. A disciplined brain works like a filter. It cuts out useless input, prioritizes the essential, and saves neural energy. That's not a metaphor, that's physiology. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for focus and decision-making, consumes enormous energy. The more irrelevant decisions you make, the faster it burns out, and the harder it becomes to make the right one. That's why disciplined people appear calm. Not because they have more time, but because their brain wastes less energy fixing mistakes born from hurry. An undisciplined mind is always reacting. A disciplined mind is always directing. And the difference between reacting and directing is what separates effort from results. Have you noticed how the brain hates silence? When there's no stimulus, it creates one. When there's no urgency, it invents it. That's how the restless mind is born. A system that craves speed when it actually needs precision. Hurry is a biological reflex, not a rational choice. It comes from the same mechanism that once saved our ancestors from danger. What was useful for escaping predators has now become mental sabotage. The modern brain lives in a constant state of alert, surrounded by notifications, sounds, and microstimuli. Every phone buzz is treated as urgent, even when it isn't. And the more stimuli, the more dopamine. More dopamine, more urgency. More urgency, less clarity. That's where discipline starts to disappear. Because discipline is the ability to hold a steady intention in the presence of distractions. But an overstimulated brain loses that ability. It acts by reflex, not by decision. Neuroscience calls this dopaminergic hyperactivation. The brain starts chasing constant rewards like a radar, addicted to novelty. It becomes used to stimulation, not focus. And focus is the first thing that dies in a restless mind. Disciplined people don't have more willpower. They have less internal noise. They create conditions for the brain to think, not just react. That's why the first step toward discipline isn't doing more. It's reducing the number of stimuli that control you. A brain that reacts all the time will never command anything. And the difference between reacting and commanding is what determines the destiny of a mind. Popular culture turned willpower into a kind of superpower. If you want it badly enough, you can do it. But neuroscience is clear. Wanting is not power, it's only intention. And intention without structure is unstable. One of the most famous experiments on this was conducted at Case Western Reserve University. Researchers divided people into two groups. One group could eat the cookies on the table. The other had to resist and eat only radishes. After that, everyone was given an impossible logic puzzle to solve. The result? The group that had resisted the cookies gave up much faster. They weren't less intelligent. They had simply depleted their self-control. Willpower is like a muscle. The more you use it, the faster it tires. That explains why disciplined people seem to have more energy. They don't waste willpower on small decisions. They design their environment and routines so that the right action happens naturally. That's the key to true discipline. It's not about resisting temptation. It's about preventing it from appearing in the first place. The brain doesn't win what it must fight every day. It wins what it no longer has to face. Willpower is a scarce resource. Discipline is the system that protects it. That's why people who try to change only with motivation always fail. Because motivation is emotion, and emotion is volatile. Discipline is design, and good design doesn't rely on constant effort. It relies on intelligent structure. If you want to turn this idea into action, the first step is to stop relying on willpower and start designing your own system. The brain doesn't respect promises, it respects patterns. That means you have to replace daily decisions with fixed structures. Don't say, "I'll try to wake up early tomorrow." Say, "I'll wake up at 6, and my phone will sleep in another room." That way you remove the negotiation before it even begins. Apply this principle to everything. If you want to eat better, don't wait to resist hunger. Organize your fridge so the right choice is the easiest one. If you want to study, define the exact time and place it will happen every day. Keep both constant. The brain learns through context. When the body recognizes a pattern, it switches to automatic mode. The secret is to reduce the number of decisions you need to make. The fewer choices your brain has to process, the more energy it has left to execute. That's what separates a disciplined person from a tired one. The disciplined don't constantly wonder what they should do. They simply follow the system they built. So stop trying to be strong. Start being strategic. Design your days the way an engineer designs a machine, with processes, not with hope. Self-control isn't the act of resisting. It's the result of having prepared the environment so that resistance isn't necessary. The human brain is a machine built for efficiency. It hates conscious effort. Anything that can be turned into a pattern, it turns into one. Anything that can be automated, it automates. That's why habits are so powerful and so dangerous. They don't ask for permission. A repeated behavior gets encoded into automatic circuits outside your conscious control. The mind starts executing it on its own, like a background program running quietly beneath awareness. Discipline is exactly that, a mental code, learned and repeated until it becomes natural. Disciplined people don't wake up every day fighting laziness. They wake up and execute, because disciplined behavior has already become part of their neural identity. Science calls this implicit learning, the type of learning that happens without you realizing it. Each repetition strengthens a neural pathway. Each pathway grows stronger with use, and the stronger the circuit, the less effort it takes to repeat it. But here's a crucial detail. The brain doesn't judge whether a habit is good or bad. It only understands that something has been repeated. A disciplined mind doesn't depend on willpower. It depends on structure, repeated and consistent. Once you understand that, you realize that discipline isn't an emotional state. It's an algorithm. Every thought, every choice, every moment of resistance costs energy. The brain makes up only 2% of your body, but it consumes up to 20% of all available energy. And the area that burns the most is the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision, focus, and control. When you feel tired without having done anything physical, that's your prefrontal cortex burning out. It depletes itself every time you need to decide what to do, resist an impulse, or switch between tasks. That's why undisciplined people are always exhausted. Not because they work more, but because they waste energy on useless decisions. They overthink before acting, and then act without knowing why. They live in a loop. decide, give up, regret, and decide again. The disciplined mind, on the other hand, works with economy. It reduces the number of decisions that need to be made. Everything that can be standardized is standardized. Everything that can be removed is removed. That's why highly disciplined people often seem calm, even detached. It's not a lack of emotion, it's cognitive efficiency. They treat attention as a finite resource and protect every fragment of it. Focus isn't strength, it's energy management. You don't lose discipline because you're weak. You lose it because you waste energy on the wrong things. A brain divided among 1,000 stimuli can't sustain intention in any of them. From a neuroscientific point of view, being disciplined means learning to reduce the cost of decisions. It means turning the essential into routine so that your prefrontal cortex only works on what truly matters. The less energy you waste deciding, the more energy you have left to build. That's the math of discipline. Fewer decisions, more consistency. Less effort, more progress.
You're not as free as you think. Most of what you call choice is just a response to the environment. The brain is a machine of adaptation. It reads what's around it and acts accordingly, long before you're even aware of it. Neuroscience calls this environmental priming, external stimuli that shape your automatic behaviors. A simple example: if your phone is on the table, you'll look at it. Not because you decided to, but because your brain has been conditioned to react to that object. Every element of your environment is a trigger. Some trigger productivity, others trigger distraction. That's why undisciplined people live in conflict. They try to change behavior while keeping the same environment. Discipline doesn't grow in chaos. The environment must support the behavior you want to repeat and make the wrong one harder to perform. It's a biological rule. The brain always follows the path of least resistance. If sweets are in the cupboard, you'll eat them. If your phone is by your bed, you'll reach for it. If the people around you live distracted, you'll imitate them. That's not weakness. It's social neuroplasticity. You become a reflection of your surroundings. The disciplined person understands this and acts like an engineer. They design the environment before depending on willpower. They remove the wrong triggers and position the right ones. They keep visible what they want to remember and out of reach what they want to forget. If you want to build discipline, the first step is to physically clean the space where you live and work. Look around you. Everything that doesn't contribute to the kind of person you want to become has to go. Objects, noises, distractions, people, all of them are environmental code, and your brain is reading that code constantly. Every single element around you is a silent instruction. Start with the place where you work or study. Remove the excess. The brain thinks more clearly when the environment communicates order. Then look at where you sleep. Your room should signal rest, not stimulation. If your phone is your biggest enemy, keep it out of physical reach before you go to bed. The brain needs real barriers to respect real limits. At the same time, reposition the triggers that help you. If you want to read more, keep the book visible. If you want to exercise, set out your workout clothes the night before. If you want to wake up early, put your alarm clock far from the bed. That forces your body to act before your mind starts negotiating with laziness. Don't rely on willpower. Rely on design. You don't need to be stronger than your distractions. You need to be smarter than them. Create environments that push the right behavior forward and make the wrong one inconvenient. When the environment changes, behavior changes. And when behavior changes, identity begins to take a new shape. That's how discipline is built intelligently, through spatial design, not through resistance. The brain adapts to everything it repeats, including the world around it. So if you really want to change, don't start from the inside out. Start with what surrounds you, because the world around you is programming your brain every single day, with or without your permission. The brain is the best student in the universe, but it doesn't learn from words, it learns from repetition. Every time you repeat an action, the same neurons fire together, and when they fire together, they form stronger connections. That's what neuroscience calls synaptic plasticity. Discipline is simply using this principle in your favor. It's not about forcing yourself to change, but about teaching the brain until it learns to act on its own. And the kind of learning that truly reshapes behavior is implicit. It happens beneath awareness.
The
train your brain to learn automatically, follow a simple structure. First, pick a single, measurable behavior. Nothing vague like, I'll change my life. Choose something concrete and observable. I'll study for 30 minutes. I'll walk for 10. I'll meditate for 5. The brain learns through repetition of specific patterns, not abstract intention. Then, repeat the action at the same time and in the same place until it feels automatic. Consistency creates predictability, and predictability creates neural comfort. The more stable the context, the faster the brain binds the behavior to the environment. And finally, never break the chain. Each day of repetition is a vote for the new circuit. Each break resets part of the process. That's why consistency matters more than intensity. Even on bad days, do the minimum required. The goal is simply to keep the pathway alive inside the brain. That's why fighting a bad habit is useless. You don't beat addiction by resisting it. You beat it by offering the brain a better reward. Dopamine is the messenger at the center of this process. It's released not when you receive pleasure, but when your brain anticipates it. That means a bad habit isn't fueled by the act itself, but by the expectation of relief. And this is where the scientific strategy of substitution begins. You must change the address of pleasure. Start by identifying the trigger behind the habit. It's rarely the behavior itself that controls you. It's the context that activates it. Notice what comes before: the time, the place, the emotion. Smoking, for example, might not be the addiction. The trigger is the break, the pause, the momentary relief. Then, replace the behavior but keep the trigger. The brain needs continuity, not rupture. If stress is your cue, trade the cigarette for deep breathing, a short walk, or a sport you enjoy. The stimulus stays the same, but the response changes, and over time, the new response grows stronger. Next, increase the reward of the new habit. Pair it with genuine pleasure. Listen to music, track your progress, celebrate small wins. The brain must see that the new path also produces dopamine. Without pleasure, no habit survives. And finally, remove access to the old circuit. As long as the old stimulus is nearby, the brain will return to it. The environment must support the new route. Temptation should never be within reach. With time, the new behavior starts to bring the same relief the old one did. Dopamine moves to a new address, and when that happens, the brain understands. This is the new pattern. Substitution is the most intelligent form of discipline because it works with the brain, not against it. You don't have to fight your impulses. You need to redirect them. You can have the sharpest mind in the world, but if the body is unregulated, discipline won't last. The brain is a physical organ, and its ability to make decisions depends on the chemistry that fuels it. That's why sleep and biological rhythm are as essential as focus. During deep sleep, the brain performs two critical functions. It consolidates recent learning and habits, and it restores the prefrontal cortex, the center of self-control. Sleeping poorly is like starting the day with the handbrake on. You can still move, but every decision takes twice the effort. That's why tired people are more impulsive. An exhausted brain seeks fast rewards. Discipline begins with the circadian rhythm. The brain operates in roughly 24-hour cycles, what we call the circadian rhythm. Within that rhythm, hormones like melatonin, cortisol, and dopamine rise and fall naturally, defining periods of energy, focus, and rest. Ignoring that rhythm is like trying to swim against the current. Going to bed late, waking up to alarms, and drowning yourself in coffee is the perfect recipe for a restless, unstable mind. You can master your thoughts, control your impulses, and still fail to be disciplined if you ignore the biological clock that governs everything inside you. Discipline isn't only a mental act, it's physiological. The brain, focus, and willpower all follow the rhythm of the body, and when that rhythm breaks, the mind becomes unstable and vulnerable to distraction. Sleep is the first pillar of this structure. During deep rest, the brain maintains the circuits that help you decide and resist. It clears chemical waste, reorganizes information, and reactivates the neural connections linked to memory and self-control. Sleeping too little is like trying to think with loose wires. You can still reason, but the system keeps short-circuiting. Impulsivity rises, focus fades, and willpower drains faster. The body operates in cycles called circadian rhythms, roughly 24-hour variations that regulate everything: mood, energy, concentration, and hormone release. When you sleep and wake at random hours, you force the brain to recalibrate the system every single day. That steals energy and destroys consistency. Disciplined people don't control time. They align with it. That's how they sustain stable energy, while the rest of the world swings between euphoria and exhaustion. If you want to train your brain for discipline, start with the body. Set a fixed bedtime, ideally before 11 p.m. That's when your body activates its natural restoration processes. Wake up close to sunrise. Natural light signals the brain that a new cycle has begun, balancing cortisol and dopamine. Before bed, eliminate artificial stimuli. Screams trick the brain into believing it's still daytime, blocking the release of melatonin, the hormone that prepares you for rest. Dim the lights, slow the pace, and repeat this every night. With time, your brain will recognize the pattern and fall asleep on its own, without struggle. Discipline is born from predictability, and sleep is the ultimate training in predictability. Sleeping well isn't indulgence, it's strategy. It's the moment when the brain rebuilds itself for the next day. A rested body decides better, resists more, and thinks clearly. The undisciplined try to control the mind without tending to the body. The disciplined understand that body and mind are one system, and that rest is a structural part of the order that keeps everything standing. Every human behavior is driven by a reason, but most people never bother to find theirs. They say they want to change, but they don't know what they're chasing or what they're running from. Without clarity, the brain simply doesn't obey. The human mind is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Those two poles form the most primitive and most powerful motivational system that exists. And it's precisely this system that governs discipline. When the reason is weak, the brain chooses immediate pleasure. When the reason is strong, it endures discomfort. Discipline, therefore, doesn't come from strength. It comes from emotional clarity. If you don't know what's at stake, your mind will give up the moment pain appears. To uncover your true why, use a simple but profound method. Ask yourself why 5 times. Each answer pushes you one level deeper toward the truth. You might start with something superficial like, I want to wake up early. But as you keep asking, you reveal the real motive beneath it. I want to wake up early. Why? Because I want more time. Why? Because I want to work on my personal goals. Why? Because I want to change my life. Why? Because I can't stand the feeling of wasting my potential. It's at that final layer that the brain understands. It must feel the emotional consequence of what you want or what you fear losing. Motivation doesn't live on the surface. It lives in meaning. But there's an important detail. The right reason isn't purely positive. The mind also needs a negative reason, something to escape from. Pain is a powerful fuel when consciously directed. Think about what will happen if nothing changes. What will your life, your body, your mind look like 5 years from now? Visualize it vividly. The brain responds to anticipated pain with the same urgency as real danger. A strong why is always dual, something to move toward and something to move away from. That tension creates direction. When you know where you're going and what you refuse to return to, discipline stops being a struggle. It becomes self-preservation. You don't maintain a habit because you're strong. You maintain it because you've understood the cost of quitting. The brain obeys the most emotionally real reason, and when the reason is true, the behavior becomes inevitable. Human beings act according to who they believe they are, not what they say they want. The brain doesn't execute intentions, it executes identities. Every time you say that's just how I am, you're writing a line of code inside your mind. And the body follows that code without question. That's why true discipline begins the moment you stop seeing yourself as someone trying to change and start seeing yourself as someone who is disciplined. Your internal language is the interface of your brain. It shapes behavior long before action ever takes place. When a person says, I'm trying to be organized, the brain hears,
I'm not there yet. But when they say, I am an organized person, the brain interprets that as a command for coherence. The mind begins searching for behaviors that confirm that identity. Neuroscience calls this cognitive dissonance, the discomfort of acting against what we believe ourselves to be. And it's exactly that discomfort that stabilizes the new behavior. With each repetition, the brain reinforces the cycle. Action, arrow, coherence, arrow, identity, arrow, new action. Over time, behavior stops being a decision and becomes a natural expression of who you are. But there's a subtle difference between those who change and those who only talk about it. Identity isn't created by affirmations alone. It's built through concrete evidence. The brain believes what it sees you do. Every small, consistent act is a vote for the new self. It's not about doing more. It's about doing enough for the brain to recognize that the new pattern is real. Want to change your identity? Then act as if you already are the person you wish to become. Even if it feels forced at first, your brain is watching and learning. It needs consistent signals, and when it receives them, it rewrites the code. You can rewrite who you are, one action at a time. Every morning you wake up at the time you chose, the brain records, I am someone who keeps my promises. Every time you choose focus over distraction, it writes, I am someone who controls my impulses. These micro-evidences build a new architecture, and disciplined behavior begins to emerge automatically. A disciplined mind is, in truth, a coherent mind. It doesn't struggle to do what's right. It simply no longer knows how to do what's wrong, because the wrong no longer fits who it has become.
Discipline isn't a talent, it's a construction. And every construction begins with an act of awareness. You now understand that the brain isn't your enemy, it's your laboratory. What you repeat, it records. What you observe, it reinforces. And what you ignore, it erases. The mind is not a prison, it's a learning machine waiting for clear commands. But here's a truth few are willing to face. No one will save you from indiscipline. No mentor, book, or technique can replace the moment you finally decide to act. Transformation is solitary, because the brain only changes when you force it to, through repetition of the right behavior, even without motivation, even without desire. That's where real strength is born. You no longer need to believe that discipline is suffering. It's simply the natural consequence of a well-trained system, a well-cared-for brain, a body in rhythm, a clear purpose, and a coherent identity. That's all it takes for the right behavior to become inevitable. Discipline isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters consistently until what matters becomes instinct. Now I want you to do something. Pause for a moment and write in the comments, I am becoming disciplined. That simple sentence is a milestone. When you write it, your brain understands that the decision is real, and real decisions create new neural connections. It's the first command of the new identity you're programming right now. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. Here, we don't just talk about discipline, we build it through science, reason, and self-awareness. Each video is a lesson for those who want to think better, live better, and master themselves through logic, not emotion. Remember this, a disciplined mind isn't born from strength, it's born from clarity. You don't conquer chaos by fighting it. You conquer it by building order within yourself. Every day you choose focus over distraction, presence over impulse, purpose over instant pleasure. Your brain records, this is who I am now. And when that pattern stabilizes, something extraordinary happens. Discipline stops being an effort and becomes your nature. Because the true power is not in controlling the world, but in controlling yourself.
You spent 3 hours yesterday learning something important. This morning, you can barely remember the main points. By next week, it'll be gone completely. This isn't a focus problem. It's not age. And it's not because you're not smart enough. In 1951, a 33-year-old physicist named Richard Feynman accepted a teaching position in Brazil. He walked into classrooms at the Centro Brasileiro de Pesquisas Físicas expecting eager students. What he discovered instead was a learning catastrophe so complete, so universal, that it explains why your brain is deleting everything you're trying to learn right now. This comes from Feynman's documented account in Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. The mechanism he uncovered doesn't just explain forgetting, It reveals the invisible difference between people who retain knowledge for life and people who pass exams but remember nothing. By the end of this, you'll know exactly why your brain betrays you. More importantly, you'll have the specific method Feynman used to make knowledge permanent. The story begins with Feynman stepping off a plane in Rio de Janeiro. He'd been invited to teach physics for a year. These were serious students at a prestigious institution. They attended lectures, they took notes, they studied textbooks, they passed exams with high marks. Feynman's first few lectures went smoothly. Students nodded. They asked questions using the right terminology. Everything seemed normal. Then Feynman did something unusual. During a lecture on polarized light, he asked a student to explain what they'd learned the previous week about Brewster's angle. The student stood up and recited perfectly. Brewster's angle is the angle at which light reflected from a surface is completely polarized. Textbook perfect, word for word. Feynman asked, "What does that mean?" Silence. He tried again. "Can you give me an example? What surface? What would I see?" The student looked confused. Other students shifted uncomfortably. Nobody could answer. They had memorized the definition flawlessly. They could recite it under exam conditions, but they had no idea what it meant. You've done this. You memorized formulas for calculus, but couldn't explain why integration works. You learned accounting principles, but panic when someone asks you to apply them to a real scenario. You read that business book everyone praised, highlighted passages, then couldn't summarize the core idea a month later. Your brain stored the words perfectly. It deleted the understanding completely. Feynman started testing this systematically. He'd ask students to explain concepts in different words, to apply principles to new situations, to describe what they'd actually see if they performed an experiment. Same result every time. Perfect recitation, zero comprehension. But here's where it gets worse. These students had spent years in this system. They'd passed hundreds of exams, they had credentials, they looked educated, but Feynman discovered they couldn't answer a single question that required actual thinking. He found textbooks where students had underlined passages. When he looked closer, he realized they were memorizing which sentences to underline based on previous exams, not because they understood why those sentences mattered. One textbook chapter started, "Triboluminescence is the phenomenon where light is emitted when crystals are crushed." Students had this memorized. Feynman asked if anyone could name one substance that was triboluminescent. Nobody knew. The textbook never mentioned actual crystals, just the word crystals in abstract. These students could define triboluminescence perfectly. They just had no connection to reality. The same principle destroys your retention today. You attend that conference, take notes on key frameworks, then can't remember a single actionable insight 3 days later. You complete that online course, get the certificate, then freeze when someone asks you to actually use what you learned. Your brain is doing exactly what those Brazilian students' brains did. It's storing symbols without connecting them to meaning. Feynman was baffled. How could an entire educational system produce this result? Then he attended other professors' lectures. He watched how they taught. He examined their textbooks more carefully. He discovered something disturbing. The professors were teaching the same way they'd been taught. They'd lecture about dielectric polarization without ever explaining what a dielectric was or why anyone cared. They'd write equations on blackboards without connecting them to anything students could see or touch. Students copied these equations. They memorized them. They reproduced them on exams. But the equations were just shapes on paper, disconnected from physical reality. Feynman called this cargo cult science in his later Caltech commencement address. The students had the appearance of learning, the notebooks, the terminology, the exam scores, but none of the substance. Like cargo cult members building fake airstrips hoping planes would land, these students were going through learning motions, hoping knowledge would appear. It never did. This explains why you forget. Your brain doesn't delete information randomly. It deletes information that has no connections. When you learn something as isolated words, blockchain is a distributed ledger technology, your brain has nowhere to store it except as a string of syllables. There's no web of meaning, no connection to things you already understand, no link to situations where you'd use it. So your brain does what it's designed to do. It assumes this information doesn't matter and deletes it to make room for things that do. The students in Brazil could pass exams because exams tested recitation. But the knowledge evaporated immediately because it was never connected to anything real. You've experienced this exact pattern. You crammed for that certification exam, passed with a good score, then couldn't answer basic questions about the material 2 months later. Not because you're forgetful, because you learned words without weaving them into your existing knowledge structure. Feynman discovered the mechanism. Now, here's what he did about it. He started teaching differently. Instead of defining terms, he'd describe phenomena first. Instead of equations, he'd start with observations anyone could make. For polarized light, he didn't begin with Brewster's angle. He started by asking, what happens when you look at a lake on a sunny day wearing polarized sunglasses? Why does glare disappear when you turn your head? Students could visualize this. They'd seen it. Now they had a hook. Then he'd explain. Light waves vibrate in different directions. Water surfaces reflect waves vibrating horizontally more than vertically. Your sunglasses block horizontal vibrations. That's why glare disappears. Same physics, completely different approach. He started with something concrete, something connected to experience, then built up to the technical term. Students started understanding, not memorizing, understanding. Feynman later refined this into what's now called the Feynman technique. The principle is simple. If you can't explain something in simple language, you don't understand it. Not simple as in dumbed down. Simple as in connected to things anyone can grasp. This is why you forget most books you read. You highlight impressive-sounding sentences, but never stop to translate them into your own words, connected to your own experience. The highlights sit there, disconnected, until your brain sweeps them away. This is why you forget most courses you take. The instructor presents frameworks and models, you copy them down, but you never build the bridge between those abstractions and your actual work. Your brain is doing its job. It's eliminating noise. The problem is, your learning method makes everything look like noise. But there's a deeper issue Feynman uncovered in Brazil. He noticed something strange about which students struggled most. The students who'd spent the most time studying, the ones with the most notes, the most underlines, the most hours logged, often performed worst on his understanding tests. They'd been reinforcing the wrong thing. Every hour spent memorizing disconnected facts was an hour spent teaching their brain that this is what learning looked like. They'd built a skill, just the wrong skill, the skill of recitation without comprehension. You've built this skill too. Years of education trained you to do it. Highlight key passages, copy down important points, memorize definitions, reproduce them under test conditions. This worked in school because school mostly tested recitation. But in your career, nobody cares if you can recite. They care if you can apply, adapt, synthesize, explain. And your brain, trained for decades to store disconnected words, keeps doing what it learned to do. Feynman saw this pattern everywhere once he started looking. Students who could recite Maxwell's equations but couldn't explain why a radio worked. Students who'd memorized thermodynamic laws but couldn't predict whether ice would melt faster in a vacuum. The words were there. The understanding was absent. This is why you can read 3 books on leadership and still freeze in your first management situation. You memorize the principles, provide clear feedback, build trust, delegate effectively. But you never connected them to specific moments, specific challenges, specific conversations. So, when the moment comes, your brain searches for relevant knowledge and finds words, just words. And words don't tell you what to do. Feynman documented his Brazilian experience as a warning, but he also provided the solution. The solution isn't studying harder, it's studying differently. After returning from Brazil, Feynman developed a teaching philosophy he used at Caltech for decades. His lecture series, now published as The Feynman Lectures on Physics, demonstrates the principle in action. He never started with equations. He started with questions anyone could ask. Why is the sky blue? Why does ice float? How does a magnet work? Then he'd build understanding layer by layer, each layer connected to the previous one, each layer testable against experience. His students didn't just pass exams. They retained knowledge for life, because that knowledge was woven into a web of meaning, not stored as isolated facts. Here's what this means for everything you're trying to learn right now. You're probably learning backwards. You're starting with conclusions, the frameworks, the models, the definitions, and trying to memorize them. This is why they disappear. Reverse the process. Start with the problem the knowledge solves. Start with the question it answers. Start with the phenomenon it explains. Before you read another page of that technical book, ask, what real situation would make me need this information? Before you take notes in that workshop, ask, what specific problem at work would this solve? Then, and only then, learn the content. But learn it as the answer to that question, not as isolated information. This is what Feynman did instinctively. It's why he could explain quantum electrodynamics to non-physicists. He never memorized disconnected equations. He built each piece of knowledge onto a foundation of understanding connected to things he could see and test and verify. But there's a second critical step. Feynman's technique requires you to explain what you learned in your own words, as if teaching someone with no background, not summarizing, not paraphrasing, explaining from scratch using only concepts and words your listener already knows. When you try this, something remarkable happens. You instantly discover the gaps. You'll start explaining, hit a point where you realize you can't actually describe what happens next, and discover you memorize that part without understanding it. This is the moment of truth. Most people panic here. They think, I should have understood this. I'm not smart enough. Wrong diagnosis. You found the disconnect before it became permanent. Now you can go back and build the actual connection. Feynman did this constantly. In his documented conversations with colleagues, he'd explain ideas using everyday analogies. When the analogy broke down, he knew he'd hit a boundary of his understanding. He'd say, I don't actually understand that part yet. Then he'd go figure it out. This habit, explaining in simple terms, finding the gaps, filling them, is why Feynman retained knowledge that others with similar intelligence forgot. The mechanism is simple. Your brain remembers information woven into a connected structure. It deletes information stored as isolated units. So, here's your system, starting Monday morning. Pick something you're trying to learn right now. A book, a course, a skill for work. Before you consume more content, stop and ask, what problem does this solve? Write down a specific scenario where you'd use this knowledge. Make it concrete. Not, I'll use this for better decision making. Instead, I'll use this next time I have to choose between 2 job offers. Now, as you learn, constantly test comprehension. After each section, close the book and explain it out loud to an imaginary person who knows nothing about this topic. Use only words they'd understand. No jargon unless you define it in their terms first. If you need to say quantum superposition, explain it as the particle exists in multiple states at once, like a coin spinning in the air being both heads and tails until it lands. When you hit a part you can't explain simply, stop. Don't move forward. That's the disconnect. That's the part your brain will delete next week. Go back to the source. Read it again. But this time, build the bridge. Connect it to something you already understand. Find the analogy. Describe what you'd see, hear, feel if you encountered this in real life. Only when you can explain it, simply do you move on. This feels slower than highlighting and note-taking. It is slower, but highlighting is fake progress. You're moving through pages without learning anything that lasts. Feynman's method is real progress. You're moving through less content, but you're actually learning it permanently. 3 months from now, test yourself. With the highlighting method, you'll remember almost nothing. With Feynman's method, you'll be able to explain the core concepts without reviewing, because they're not stored as words anymore. They're woven into your understanding of how things work. There's one more documented insight from Feynman's Brazil experience that changes everything. Near the end of his year there, he gave a lecture to the faculty about what he'd observed. He explained the problem, students memorizing without understanding. He showed them the evidence. Perfect recitation, 0. Application? The faculty agreed completely. They nodded. They said yes, this is a serious problem. They thanked him for identifying it. Then they went right back to teaching the same way. Feynman realized something crucial. The faculty had memorized his critique without understanding it either. They could recite his concerns. They just couldn't connect them to their own behavior. This is the meta lesson. Knowing about the problem doesn't fix it. You can read this entire script, understand intellectually why you forget things, and still not change your learning method. Because understanding intellectually and understanding in your bones are different things. You need to experience the technique working. You need to try explaining something you know and feel the moment you hit the gap. You need to fill that gap and feel the difference between words you memorized and concepts you actually understand. That experience is what changes behavior, not the intellectual knowledge that you should change. So here's your single action step. Tomorrow, take something you learned recently, anything, a chapter from a book, a concept from a course, a skill you're developing. Sit down with a blank page, no notes, no references, just your memory. Try to explain it to someone who knows nothing about the topic. Write it out or say it out loud. Use only words they'd understand. You'll hit the gaps within minutes. Those gaps are what your brain is about to delete. Now go back to the source. But this time, build the bridge. Connect the concept to something concrete. Find the analogy, make it real, then try explaining again. Keep cycling until you can do the entire explanation without gaps, using only simple language. This one exercise will reveal more about your learning gaps than a month of highlighting and note-taking, and it will teach you in your bones the difference between memorizing and understanding. Feynman spent his career proving a simple truth. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it yet. Not, you're not smart enough. Not, it's too complicated. You just haven't built the connections yet. Your brain isn't failing you. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, discarding disconnected information to make room for knowledge that actually matters. The question is, are you giving it knowledge or just feeding it words?